Okay.
Okay.
Xavier and then Ivy joined. Okay. I hand it to you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Manhattan Community Board 11 Housing Committee meeting. Jeremiah Schloman, the chair, and I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. So I will first see if there is a motion to adopt the agenda.
Let me do the opening remarks first.
Actually, yeah, sorry about that. I jumped the gun. Go ahead, Marlene. We're going to do opening remarks first.
Completely fine. Good evening, everyone. Until further notice, all meetings of Manhattan Community Board 11 will be conducted by video conference. Links to register to attend the video conferences for each of our respective committee meetings will be published on the meetings calendar on our website. For those of you calling in, it is www.cb11m.org. Some housekeeping: to avoid crosstalk and help the meeting run effectively, panelists and attendees are asked to keep their microphones on mute when they are not speaking. It is also helpful to utilize headphones. Those participating by phone can dial *6 to unmute, and that is also how you mute your line. If you wish to share a question or comment, you must do so by utilizing the raised hands function. Those participating by phone can dial *9 to raise their hand. Our staff, myself, will monitor those requests to ensure that hands are recognized in turn. Questions left in the chat will not be recognized. Board members will be called on first, then attendees. Please keep your questions or comments brief and on topic. Jeremiah, I'm going to send it back to you now.
Thank you, Marlene. All right, so now I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. If I have any such motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Xavier.
Excellent. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Do you want to call the roll now, just so you note the attendance, or you can do it by acclamation at the end?
All right, great. So Marlene actually is going to call the attendance here, and you can vote on the agenda.
Okay. Stephanie Arroyo. Stephanie?
Here. Sorry about that. Here.
Okay. Raja Flores. I don't think Raja joined. Are you on yet, Raja?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. John, you made the motion. John Green?
Here.
Thank you. I don't see Robert Harvey. Robert, did you join?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Ivy Hume?
Here.
Thank you. Xavier, you seconded. Xavier Santiago?
Here. Aye.
Thank you. Jeremiah Schloman?
Here.
Thanks. Candy Vives Vasquez?
Here.
Thank you. It carries. Jeremiah, you could move forward.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go into announcements now. The first announcement on the agenda is that there's a virtual tenant resource fair on March 31st, so at the end of this month, that the Community Board 11 is doing in partnership with HPD. So, I encourage you all to attend and also to disseminate this information. We have there's already a flyer, right, Marlene, for it that HPD had done? Yeah.
Yes, there is a flyer.
Right. Okay. So if I can circulate that if it hasn't been yet, right? I don't think it has. So at least I haven't to the committee. So I'll circulate that to you all so that you can also in your networks disseminate as well. But we hope, obviously we like to have these resource fairs as much as possible, particularly during this uncertain time. With the pandemic, things are always evolving. And so it's really great to be out there as much as possible, really clearing up and providing folks with current information and, of their rights and obligations, since things are very uncertain, very stressful, and can be really confusing. So do I have any other announcements from committee members? Okay, so any announcements from anyone in the public? Just have a couple. All right. I do want to, one last announcement that I have for the committee is that this committee meeting will unfortunately be my last one on as a member of Community Board 11, as the chair of this committee. It's a decision I've talked it over with some folks. Some of you already know about it. It was a very difficult decision, and I'm, really proud of the work that that this housing committee has done over the last few years, and the policies we've pushed for, much of which I've done alongside many of you. And for those that are newer members that came on this session, it's a shame that we couldn't really get to know each other by interacting in person and at committee meetings and full board meetings. But I do have a lot of hope for the future of the direction of the Housing Committee and the Community Board in East Harlem in general. I think there are a lot of talented folks, and there's a lot of folks who are passionate and who are very interested in empowering our neighbors, the people that we represent, and the people that we work alongside and on behalf of here in East Harlem. So that's this announcement I have. I'll be working on this resource fair. So that's why I'm staying on through the end of March, but I will resign at the end of this month. So, okay. So any other announcements from anyone on the committee or public? Last chance before we move on. All right, do I have any informational updates from the committee?
Yes, great job, Jeremiah, and we're going to miss having you as the leader of this committee. Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I really do. All right, so we'll move right into it then. No informational updates. So we'll go into the committee discussions. So one item that I wanted included on the agenda is for us to just talk a little bit about these proposals, RAD and Blueprint for Change, which we know from NYCHA, they've said that between those two programs that they anticipate being able to cover all of the, bridge the gap for the capital needs for the complete portfolio of the housing authority throughout the city. I think it was Stephanie who actually had raised a really good point a couple of months ago, maybe, when we were talking about this, and it was around the time of, the special election in the Senate and the change in control of the White House and Congress. And so it's, we want to know where would that leave us potentially? I don't know if folks remember, or if you heard it, there was a lot of information that was provided by Senator Schumer when he came to the last full board meeting. I was happy to be able to talk a little bit more directly about what specifically affects New York City, East Harlem specifically. And so there were some things that I thought were encouraging. One of the items was, Senator Schumer had noted that there would be, I believe, I took notes, I think it was 70 billion. That's correct, $70 billion of an infrastructure bill that's part of the COVID relief package, the $1.9 trillion relief package that was proposed in Washington. But 70 billion would be in infrastructure, and Senator Schumer said specifically that it would also go towards public housing, traditionally marginalized, lower income communities, communities of color that have really experienced a lot of disinvestment over the years. And in his exchange with committee members, Senator Schumer was right to point out that this has been a coordinated campaign of disinvestment over the decades by members of both major political parties, state, local officials in New York and New York City. So there was a lot of hope that folks who were advocates for public housing, who were public housing advocates, who were who are pushing for an expansion and supporting increased support for public housing rather than continued disinvestment, right? We can't, not to take for granted the fact that there's no money. There's money if the priorities are whatever the money's there for the priorities, whatever the politicians say the priorities are, right? So, there's, how much money we spend, for example, on our military, right? That budget is incredibly bloated, and even the next far outstrips even the next 5 super major powers, military powers behind us combined. So, there's priorities that are set. And whether you agree with that, that's one thing, that's another conversation. But the fact is that there's money there, depending on whatever the politicians say they need, whatever they want to put the money towards, right? So, there used to be money for public housing, and then over the years, it continued to dry up. And so we're left with this massive hole that we are trying to shore up here. And so you have housing authorities turning circles, looking at private-public partnerships, which are themselves controversial to a large degree. RAD involves private entities. So there's concerns and legitimate concerns about privatization of public goods, of public housing, public services. And Blueprint for Change, of course, we know engages a different tactic and tries to use, it's a statutory public entity that is created to keep it end to end under public control. I think that's a lot better. I don't know, again, in light of the priorities in Washington, whether that's something that still they should move full steam ahead with or not. I certainly get the sense that NYCHA, even though they back both RAD and Blueprint for Change as necessary given the circumstances, the facts, the political climate, and the history of disinvestment, I still get the sense that when I hear them talk about Blueprint for Change, that they're a little more excited about that because they understand that RAD runs into that problem of privatization concerns. So again, I know, NYCHA officially supports it, and they talk about how they preserve the public nature because the housing authority would still maintain ownership over the land, right? So at any rate, that's all sort of, again, a quick overview and touching bit back, just circling back on some of the things that we've talked about over many sessions in this committee. But I just wanted to hear what people's thoughts were in light of, the Senator Schumer's visit to the community board. One other thing that he was he made sure to let us know is that he said that he did a clever thing where he also established in the relief package a special fund for public housing jurisdictions that are in receivership. And there's only 3 jurisdictions in the country that are in receivership. All of you likely know by now that New York City is one of them. There's the monitor in place that oversees, that has to approve NYCHA's proposals. And it's monitored by a court ultimately as well, federal court. And Senator Schumer further pointed out that this special fund will go to just those 3 jurisdictions since they're in receivership. Furthermore, New York City has 80% of the housing that is under receivership. So again, our one jurisdiction accounts for 80% of those. So we would get presumably 80% of whatever that is in that designated fund. Unfortunately, I don't know what that amount is exactly. Obviously, I don't know if we're talking millions, hundreds of millions, billions, that could make a big difference, right? Because obviously if there's a special fund from jurisdictions in receivership, we know what the number is for New York City. It's 40 billion, right, in capital needs. So what is this special fund? But we know that's there, right? So these ideas are percolating, they're being debated and actually seriously considered as certain wings of the Democratic Party are pushing for that are more supportive of public housing and other permanent affordable housing options for low income and working class folks. So with that, I will open up the floor to any opinions or thoughts that folks might have on this topic. I see Xavier's hand. Go ahead, Xavier.
Hey, Jeremiah, and thank you, everyone. I'm just driving still at the moment, but I wanted to say one of the big things that we should examine, especially as Schumer brought it up, would be the accountability portion of it through the budget reconciliation process. And I think that's something for all of us to keep our eyes on because we do not know what things may change when it arrives at the Senate, which they just recently passed this. And so as we're looking for this bill to pass toward the mid-March. There's things that could change. We did reach out to Schumer's office to convey those paragraphs and those sections. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us just to keep tabs on all of that and how the relief will come out of the final bill. So that would be my only comment, is just more on the accountability function and tracking it as we go along. Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks, Xavier. I think that is a good idea. It's important. We also don't, and again, it's true, we can't take all this for a foregone conclusion, right? So I think Congress wanted to pass that $1.9 trillion bill last Friday was the hopes. And then of course we all, or I don't know if we all do, but there was all the, the fiasco with the parliamentarian ruling that, minimum wage increase could not be a part of the COVID relief bill. So, there's still a lot of things that are up in the air and little details. And it is true that we don't know what the final count will look like, right? And part of that might also be why Senator Schumer didn't say out the gate. He was shooting out a lot of numbers, right? He had a lot of numbers and he was prepared, but he didn't specify a number for the special fund. Anyone else have any thoughts? Feel free to raise your hands or type if you can't talk. Yeah, I think that we're already starting down this path of monitoring. I know that over the last couple of years, the staff of the community board and other members as well have been a lot better about talking about compliance and checking up on things, right? Because we often have entities come through here, private, public, and say a bunch of stuff, promise a bunch of stuff, and we don't always know how well that's being executed, what has been promised, if at all. So I know a lot of people have been good, and that is something that I look forward, if I visit community board in the future, to see those sorts of compliance things happening. I do think that makes us a lot more effective, and it also dovetails with what Xavier was saying about staying also apprised of current events, right? Because that also helps affect how our advocacy will go with respect to these programs. All right, well, if anyone thinks of something later, feel free again to raise your hand and we can circle back. I'm happy to, because it's a big topic, but a very important one, and one that is always evolving. But what I hope is that it will continue to evolve in the right direction, which for me personally, and I know also for a lot of you, would mean serious and true investment in public housing, which is the only permanent affordable housing option in East Harlem and in most of the country, really, too. All right. Next agenda item or discussion point is a standing agenda item of the update on the eviction moratorium in New York City Housing Court. So I just like to touch base every month just to say, even if there's no update and it's the same, I want folks to know that. So with where we're at right now is we actually did just cross a very important date, ladies and gentlemen. February 26th was, as a practical matter, February 28th, but February ended on a weekend. So February 26th was last Friday, and that was the end of the blanket eviction moratorium in New York City. However, there is a very important asterisk to that. If you file a COVID hardship declaration, you have a further eviction stay through May 1st, 2021. Now, some folks were a little concerned because they thought, oh, do I have to file the COVID declaration, the hardship declaration before the end of February to get the benefit of the extended protection? The consensus in the legal community, I can tell you, is no, that you can continue to file hardship declarations even now. As a matter of fact, folks who are sued in housing court and end up getting dates, if you qualify for the hardship declaration, you can submit that even on your court date. So you can come on whatever, I'm just throwing an arbitrary date, March 20th, and you have a court date. You can come there with the hardship declaration completed, or even if it's not completed, say, Your Honor, I heard there's a hardship declaration. Can I fill that out? And there is a lot of emphasis right now on continuing that stay for folks who qualify for the hardship declaration. Okay, so it's not too late at any point. I do encourage folks, to the extent you're advising people or informing them about the current status of things, of course, don't wait. There's a very easy way to get it done. You can go to, I'll put the link in the chat. I've done that before. I believe off the top of my head, it's evictionfreeny.org. And it's a partnership. I think the Right to Counsel Coalition spearheads it in New York City, who does a lot of work around increasing representation for tenants in housing court, particularly low-income tenants. They have launched a website which makes the hardship declaration really easy. I think it's in partnership with justfix.nyc, which is a great tech company that does a lot of good work for working class and low income communities, particularly tenants' rights, because they recognize how fundamental housing is, this need. So if you hear about people filing HP proceedings for repairs in their apartments online, that's because the court partnered with Just Fix. Just Fix came up with an idea and sold it to the court to make it easier for pro se tenants. And it's a wonderful service. They do the same thing with this website. You can click and it does everything. It knows the requirements. You can just put in your address. It searches up even if the tenant doesn't know who the owner is, it searches the property records to determine that for the tenant. It will make it really easy for you to fill out the hardship declaration online, and it will automatically at no charge send by, I believe it's certified mail, a copy to your landlord as well. And if you put that you have a housing court case, the Just Fix will also send it and will also send it to the court so that the clerk has a copy and the court has a record of that as well. So let me put that, I'm going to do 2 seconds. I just want to make sure my website is right. Yep, that's the one. Okay, good, it is, evictionfreeny.org. Okay, I'm going to put it in the chat now. And all right, also to attendees, all right. And it offers it in English, a lot of languages. They know what they're doing. So I'm not even gonna list it. It's a drop-down menu of the major languages in New York. So, oh, Candy, you have your hand up. I think you're the only one. Go ahead, Candy.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes, okay, good. Because
Yes.
I know last time I had a hard time. So my question is, so what happens when the tenants receive the declaration of hardship? Now, the confusing part is that one client I had, she called and she said that she never received a notice from the landlord stating that she has an LNT case, right? And then on top of that, she received then the one from her landlord, from the court, the declaration letter. That declaration letter, then she called her management company and they said that she had to go to the courthouse to give it to them, not to give it to the landlord. Because she wanted to hand deliver it to them. And they said, no, you got to go to the courthouse and do that. But she called the number that was on the declaration. And there were different numbers for them to call because it goes by boroughs and everything. But when she did call for her borough, no one was picking up the phone. It was just hanging up. So now what happens? She gives it still to the landlord and then let them deal with it and it stays on their file?
So, okay, so unfortunately, it is my opinion that the landlord is giving a hard time, or if I'm giving the benefit of the doubt, is very confused about the process because if the landlord tenants are permitted to send it to their landlord. You can also file it with the court, and it is a good idea, but it's not required because under this legislation with the hardship declaration, and the guidance that's issued by the courts are actually supposed to also ask, and it's become a requirement that with the filing of the housing court case, that the landlord allege that it sent the hardship declaration as well, right? So the law does put a lot more burden on the other side and is a lot more forgiving, as it should be, in my opinion, for the tenant and making it easier for the tenant, right? So my argument would be that the landlord that's not accurate, that she, as a matter of fact, not only is it inaccurate, but it's dangerously inaccurate. You know how many notices I get from court personnel, court attorneys and judges telling me, please tell you, I have one client who, no matter, God bless him, no matter how many times I tell him stop going to the court in person, he keeps doing it. And the court's sending me emails saying, please get him to stop, especially when he's represented by counsel. We are trying to limit anyone coming in person. It's supposed to be an ultimate last case emergency. You can't get to technology, whatever the case may be, right? So that's not correct, unfortunately. I would, obviously there's a whole slew of other legal issues that I would leave it to her counsel that I hope she would get, you know, regarding service of the papers, you know, if there was improper service, there may be grounds for dismissal of her case, technical grounds, and in addition to whatever substantive facts she has. But that's not true. What they said about the hardship declaration is not true. It should have been sufficient for her, you know, to bring it to the landlord's office, because the landlord's maintaining litigation against her and therefore has notice of it. And the courts, again, like I said, the way the directives are written, are actually often asking landlords, landlords' attorneys, what, you know, did you send the declaration? Did they fill it out? You know, they allege that they don't have that, to their knowledge, they haven't received it, or that it's inapplicable. So this is an important piece of the puzzle. And yeah, the landlord is improperly putting the onus on her and actually misinforming her with respect to going in person to the courthouse.
Thank you. It's good to know, because she wasn't even served. I asked her if she got served. Nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
She didn't even understand that she was going to throw the paper away.
Right.
So,
And
you
she
know.
would unfortunately not be by far the first person to not get service at all or improper service and find out because the court sent something, right? So, or you got a marshal's notice out of nowhere. You know? So, yeah, but obviously those will be issues she'll have to litigate in court at some point.
Thank you.
Okay, and just to make sure people saw, I put the link in the chat. And for those who can't see the chat, again, it is www.evictionfreeny.org. Right, so I think it's a great resource. And I actually even have some of my clients do it through the website, depending on the facts. So. All right, let's see. That is any other, housing court, I will further the update. So that was the general eviction moratorium update. I also want to let people know what cases are being calendared. Right now, there is one major exception to the hardship rule. So even if there is a hardship declaration, the one exception is landlords can continue to move forward in an eviction case against a tenant if it's a nuisance case, if the landlord is alleging that the tenant is a nuisance. And the nuisance definition, very loosely, is that you are substantially interfering with the use and enjoyment of the property, you know, your neighbor's use and enjoyment of the property. And obviously it has to be it has to be persistent conduct to be a nuisance. You can't have, for example, one or even two incidents, for example, of loud noise complaints or, you know, whatever the claim may be against the tenant, other violations of the lease. There's got to be a pattern. But if the landlord alleges that there is a pattern and that it's an ongoing nuisance occurring during the pandemic, that is the one exception that the legislature in New York has allowed to continue moving forward. So even if you would be unaffected by COVID, you fill out a hardship declaration. That is a very important exception for folks to know. Obviously, some landlords may try to, you know, get around the rule or use that rule to their advantage to allege people are nuisances that are not. But again, that would be a legal issue that folks increasingly have a right to counsel to be able to put forth those claims in court. So that is the major housing court. Other cases, now that the moratorium has officially ended, the blanket one on February 26th, other cases are also being calendared, right? Like, for example, a typical non-payment case. However, those are covered by the hardship declaration, as I indicated earlier. So you could literally show up arguably on the first day of court without having done it, but tell the judge that it applies, and you would be happy, can I get one now? In theory, that can work even up to that point through May 1st, okay? But if you're a nuisance or alleged to be a nuisance, and it looks to be a good enough, solid enough claim on its face, then a court will allow that to move forward. And that does it for the status of, also this would apply to NYCHA termination of tenancy hearings too. So public housing residents, you have to get terminated at 250 Broadway, they moved it, I think. I forget, but where the hearings are held, you have to actually have your tenancy terminated before you can be sued in housing court. So there's a procedure through the public housing agency, not for non-payments, but for all other cases. But those are on pause as well. The moratorium applies to them. All right, and Marlene, you have a question?
Just really quick, as I know constituents are calling about this. So the hardship declaration, when you go to court, say you haven't filled it out yet, you're automatically eligible once you fill it out, or is there a process to deem you eligible?
No process.
No
Once
process.
you complete it, it's a sworn statement.
Got
It would be, I think tantamount, you're doing it under penalty of perjury, I believe, but it's definitely a sworn statement that you're alleging that you either have been financially impacted by COVID-19, or you would have an unreasonable health risk, an increased health risk if you were evicted.
Okay. So no proof is required.
Correct.
Like unemployment statement, okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, that's it, yes.
Okay.
There used to be, so in the past, there was, when the moratorium, they've taken different shapes and had very different technical rules. In the past, that what you're saying did occur. There was some disputes in court that I even had to argue based on economic hardship, because I think there was, I forget now because everything's running together, but I think it was written differently where the court was able to assess, you could dispute those sorts of things, but now it's the hardship declarations filed, it should not be calendared, or if it was already calendared, once you file it, they should just say, we're not scheduling anything through May 1st.
Okay, and there, just one more, as you were speaking, I was thinking about it. We don't know what's going to happen after May 1st. Nothing has been created yet on a local, local, state, or federal level. It's just May 1st. Okay.
Yep, you're right. And that's obviously, then that's why this is a standing agenda item, because, month to month, that can definitely change. Albany, Senator Schumer also mentioned that they're working on a federal moratorium. President Biden's on the record, you can Google it. He wants Congress to pass a federal moratorium through the end of September 2021, right? So if that happens, great. Now everywhere, obviously we're covered. Well, of course we have to look again at the specific wording, because maybe it gets watered down in order to get Republican support or something like that. But that's the general idea. And obviously federal would preempt the state moratorium. A state moratorium can give more protections than federal, but can't go below. Right?
Okay.
So the federal, if and when passed by the Biden administration, would be the baseline, whatever their requirements are. Yeah, but yeah, and then let's say Washington doesn't act, Albany might scramble in April at some point, and who knows, maybe there's a quick little extension, we don't know, right? Because that's actually what happened on December 28, 2020, right?
Right.
They're at the 11th hour, and so now let's pass a moratorium.
Exactly. So has the tenant Safe Harbor Act, is that still in effect? Because I'm blanking on the end date for that,
Yeah.
if they had an end date.
Exactly. It doesn't. It's
It
well,
doesn't.
it has, it's in relation to an event, a triggering event. So there's no fixed hard date that ends. When it's supposed to end is when the COVID lockdown restrictions are lifted in the county. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's when it's supposed to end. The Tenant Safe Harbor Act protections, that's a triggering event. So
Okay.
yeah, so as long as we are still in the pandemic and there's lockdown, it just keeps, you have the
Okay.
right to all the Tenant Safe Harbor Act defenses.
Okay.
Yeah. And just as a
Okay.
reminder for folks who, it's a whole topic on its own, but just as a quick reminder, the Tenant Safe Harbor Act allows people who were affected by the, financially impacted by the pandemic. Oh, this is where it is, Marlene. This can be contested, I think, because it's like a legal.
Okay.
But under the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, if you are financially impacted, right? So, and there's all these like requirements, but when your income dropped because due to the pandemic or during the pandemic, due to was a big debate. But if you're financially impacted during the pandemic, if you're sued for non-payment of rent, you can raise as an affirmative defense that you have been financially impacted by COVID. If you prove that defense, then the court we cannot enter what's called a possessory judgment against you. That means, oh, you failed to pay the money by X date, you can be evicted. That's a possessory judgment, right? If you prove the Tenant Safe Harbor Act defense, then the court can only enter a monetary judgment against you. You still owe the rent under the contract. There's no rent cancellation, but the landlord cannot evict you if you fail to pay. So that's the huge protection there.
Right. And that's, I think that's why I asked the question about the hardship declaration, because of the Tenant Safe Harbor Act. Like, you need to prove that with that one.
That's right.
So that was my question. So I just want to know how to answer constituents when they do call about the hardship declaration form, and let them know that they can just go ahead and apply for it, and they don't have to prove anything on the spot or after.
That's absolutely right.
Mhm.
And if anyone asks them to prove, that's wrong.
Okay.
The landlord might ask them to prove, but that's wrong. It should not
Okay.
be. They don't have to.
Okay. Thank you. That was helpful.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so that, I don't see any other hands, and that is my current state of the moratorium in New York City Housing Court. So, oh yeah, and of course, just again, this hasn't changed, so that's why I didn't bring it up, but it is important to say to people, Housing Court is still wide open for tenants to sue for repairs. If you have emergency conditions and whatever it is, inadequate heat, infestations, broken, front door lock is broken, particularly for the most pressing, no gas, right? The court's very sympathetic. Those are all moving ahead full steam and always have during the pandemic. All right, and that concludes it. So I don't have any other topics that I wanted to specifically address here. So if there's no other questions, we'll move on to old business. If anyone in the committee has old business that they would like to bring up now, feel free. Okay. Anyone in the public as well, feel free. No old business, oh, I got a hand, Xavier, go ahead.
Hey, Jeremiah, I'm not necessarily old or new business. I'm sorry. Not necessarily old or new business, but I would recommend that all of us, as we are becoming vaccinated and moving through the slow reopening, but if anyone on this team or on this call, if you hear of issues as it relates to housing, I would greatly implore all to raise it to this committee and to the executive leadership of the board so that we can actually act swiftly, especially when it comes to the moratorium. But I think in general, whether it's someone who lives in an HDFC or a co-op or in NYCHA, and you find out there's a systemic issue say with a lock needing repaired or whatnot, just please bring it to this committee. Don't wait until the next community board meeting for this committee or executive. Just send an email to everyone so we can act on it. That was my recommendation.
Thanks, Xavier. Raja?
I just wanted to follow up on what Xavier was talking about with the vaccinations. There's a lot of mistrust in some of our communities with regard to the vaccine. I've been vaccinated, and if anyone has questions or mistrust, please call me. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. But it's imperative, it's important for all of us to get vaccinated to be safe and to get rid of this monster. So please feel free to reach out to me.
And then to continue following social distancing and other safety measures even after vaccination is also important. Thank you for that. It's great. Do I have, okay, so we'll move on to any new business. Any new business from the committee? Or members of the public? Thank you, Isabel. We see, I don't know if you all saw in the chat as well, Isabel had put in there about Mitchell Lama United will be presenting at the next borough board. And there's a link for the public and it's broadcast on Facebook. So I just want to give voice to that just in case people didn't see the chat or can't access it. You can also sign up by going to Borough President Brewer's page. Okay, any new business, last opportunity, last agenda item. So anything you forgot up to this point. All right, folks, well, this was the most efficient meeting, I guess. Oh, Xavier and Marlene are both going to prevent it from ending now. So how about, yeah, go ahead.
I want to say real quick before you go, you're not getting off the hook that easily, Jeremiah. I'm almost home, but I want to say when we get over this, we got to go grab some food and some drinks and celebrate. I have had an absolute delight working with you towards housing initiatives from the very first NYCHA Housing Forum onward. We've had the intellectual debates, the discussions, the policy wonk, and the action. And you know, I got to say, it's just been an absolute honor and pleasure to work with you. And please, 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 and not to speak on behalf of the entire committee or the board, do not be a stranger.
Yeah, count me in. Yeah, count me in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that, Xavier. It has been really great. And as I told many of you who are more intimately familiar with my resignation, it was a very tough one for me that I kind of, I withheld for a number of months trying to make it not so. So, Marlene?
Oh, am I on mute? Oh. I just wanted to tell you publicly, Jeremiah, that I will miss working with you. I think we have like a great rapport, good working relationship. When I first started, you were very welcoming to me as coming on as the staff liaison for the housing committee. And Angel did tell me, you know, you got to catch him when you catch him. And yeah, that's very true. He was not lying. But I feel like even despite that, we've had a very great working rapport, and I will miss your expertise and just how warm you are. And you're always ready and willing to speak about what needs to go on the agenda. And you give me autonomy to go off and figure things out on my own and bring back what I've researched and found to you when you sign off. If you don't like it, you tell me to change this. If the T is crossed wrong, you tell me cross the T over. If it's dotted wrong, you tell me dot it over. In a very warm, welcoming, approachable way. So you will be missed.
Well, I really appreciate that, Marlene.
Jeremiah?
Who don't know, Marlene is really the glue for me here because there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes because as Marlene said, she catches me when she can catch me, but that doesn't mean the work stops in between. She's working hard in between catching me. So thank you.
Of course.
Jeremiah?
Yeah. Yes, John, I hear you.
Thank you for your leadership, and you will be missed, and good luck to you.
Thank you, sir. It's been an honor with serving with you. Well,
And you will be missed.
thank you.
Yeah, you will be missed. I'm so sorry that you're leaving us.
Yeah, I will definitely try to, contribute whenever possible. I'm still always back at the Legal Aid Society. A few colleagues of mine and I are probably thorns in management side as we continue to try to get them to up the community involvement and the connections and on the ground connections and listen and to the folks that we're really working alongside here. So I'm sure you'll see me at some point. So I really do thank you. All of you have brought so many different things to the committee. It really is amazing. I mean, intimate knowledge of NYCHA, both, from, administratively, just from experience, what you've dealt with. People have advocated with NYCHA. There's folks, who live in all sorts of housing. I know I've had rent stabilized folks, people with rent control departments. We've had small homeowners, representing a whole spectrum of what we see in East Harlem. And, I really appreciate that and I value that. And all of you have, bring, and I could go on, the sorts of development expertise, what you've done, the nonprofits you serve on, that you run, that all those sorts of things. And so it's a rich committee on an issue which I will remind you all, and I love to remind people, is always a top issue in East Harlem. Always, always. It's been like that for decades and decades. And it's never been more relevant even than it is now, right? So I really appreciate y'all's work. I hope that you continue to carry the torch and that you do great things for East Harlem and our core constituents, and even while keeping in mind the diversity of opinions and socioeconomic and races that we have. So thank you all very much. And thank you, Ivy. I see you too. So I really appreciate everything, all y'all's words, all your work, all your support. It's a great group and I will miss you all, but I'll be back. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Take care, Jim.
Aye.
Good night, everybody.
See you.
Night.